I never thought I'd have to choose between my father and my daughter. But that's exactly where I found myself one gray, heavy afternoon, standing in his living room, the air thick with disappointment and things we'd never said out loud. The old clock ticked in the corner, marking every painful second. My father sat in his favorite chair, the same one he'd used since I was a boy, his hand gripping the cane he didn't really need, but used anyway, a symbol of authority. He didn't look at me at first. He just said it, coldly, like reading a verdict. Your daughter can't stay here anymore. For a moment, I didn't understand. I blinked, half expecting him to explain. But he didn't. He just stared into the fire, his face expressionless. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. What do you mean, she can't stay here? This is our home. He finally looked up at me then, those same steel gray eyes I'd grown up fearing and admiring all at once. I mean exactly what I said, he replied. She's changing the atmosphere of this house. The way she talks, the way she dresses, the things she says, it's disrespectful. I swallowed hard. She's 15, I said quietly. She's figuring things out. That's what kids do. She's losing her values, he snapped. And you're letting her. I took a step back. My father's words had always been sharp, but this time they felt like blades. Dad, please, I said, she's not doing anything wrong. He slammed his cane against the floor, making me flinch. I won't have rebel lion under my roof, he shouted. You might have gone soft, but I still remember what discipline means. You either control her, or she leaves. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest. And then, from behind the door, a small sound. A soft, broken sob. My stomach twisted. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway, and that's when I saw her. My daughter, Emily, standing there, just outside the doorway, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She had heard everything. Emily, I whispered. She didn't say a word. Her face crumpled as she turned and ran, footsteps echoing down the hall before a door slammed shut. I looked back at my father. You see, he said quietly, this is what I'm talking about. She hides and listens, she disrespects. No, I said, my voice trembling. She's hurt, Dad. She's a child. He shook his head slowly, disappointment etched deep into his face. Children who don't learn pain when they are young, he said, learn regret when they are older. That broke something in me. 4 years, I had obeyed him. I had lived by his rules, repeated his lessons, raised my daughter under the shadow of his authority. But now, watching her cry because of something I allowed, something he demanded, I realized how much damage silence could do. I turned toward the hallway and started walking. Where are you going? He barked. To fix what you just broke, I said without turning back. Her door was locked. I stood outside it, pressing my forehead to the wood. Emily, sweetheart, please, open the door. No answer. I'm sorry, I whispered. You weren't supposed to hear that. Still nothing. Only soft sobs from the other side. I could feel her pain like it was my own. I'd been her once, a scared voice outside a door while 2 adults decided my fate. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I wasn't just her father, I was her shield. I straightened up, walked back into the living room, and faced my father again. He looked at me with the same sternness as always. Did she stop crying? He asked. I took a deep breath. No, I said firmly, but I did. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done letting you decide who stays or leaves in my life. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You forget who you're talking to. No, I said quietly, I finally remember. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain, and at that exact moment, behind me, I heard the faint click of a door unlocking. Emily had opened it. When I turned around and saw Emily standing there, my heart nearly broke. Her eyes were red, her face pale, and her hands trembled as she clutched the hem of her oversized sweater. She looked so small, too small for the weight that had just been thrown at her. But there was something else in her eyes too. Defiance. Emily, I started softly, not sure what to say. She looked from me to my father, her grandfather, sitting cold and stiff in his chair. The firelight flickered across his face, painting him in shades of pride and regret. Grandpa, she whispered, her voice shaking. Do you really want me to leave? The old man didn't move. For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard her. Then his lips tightened. It's not about what I want, he said finally. It's about what's right. Emily's chin quivered. And what's right is, sending me away? He sighed. You've become different, Emily. You talk back. You question everything. Your generation doesn't know respect anymore. She wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve. Maybe we just want to be heard. The room went quiet. Even the fire seemed to dim. Her words hit something deep, not just in him, but in me too, because I remembered saying almost the same thing to him 20 years ago, and he hadn't listened then, either. My father looked down, his thumb rubbing the edge of his cane. I could tell he was torn, pride against pain, control against compassion. Emily, I said gently, stepping closer to her, why don't you go upstairs for a bit? Let me talk to Grandpa alone. She hesitated, her eyes darting between us. You're not going to let him make me leave, right? I looked at her, my daughter, my heart walking around outside my body, and I made a promise I should have made long ago. No, I said, I'm not. She nodded, her eyes welling up again, and turned to go. But before she climbed the stairs, she looked back and said softly, Grandpa, I still love you. Then she was gone. The silence she left behind was deafening. My father stared at the empty staircase, his jaw tightening, his knuckles white around the handle of his cane. She doesn't mean that, he muttered. She does, I said. That's the problem, she means every word she says. Just like I did when I was her age. He looked at me sharply. You think this is my fault? I exhaled slowly. I think you never learned the difference between fear and respect. He slammed the cane down again, but this time, it sounded less like anger and more like exhaustion. I did what I had to do, he said quietly, to raise you, to protect this family. Protect us from what? I asked. From feeling? From talking? From being honest? He didn't answer. I sat down across from him. The fire crackled between us, glowing like the last bridge connecting two stubborn worlds. Dad, I said, my voice softer now, you taught me everything about survival, about hard work, about not giving up, and I'm grateful for that. But somewhere along the way, you forgot something. People don't stay loyal out of fear. They stay because they feel safe. He looked away, blinking hard. For a second, I saw something I'd never seen before, uncertainty. You don't understand, he murmured. When your mother died, I had to be strong. There was no room for softness. If I broke, everything would fall apart. My chest tightened. It was the first time he'd mentioned her in years. Maybe, I said gently, that's why you stopped seeing me, and now Emily, for who we are. You built walls, Dad. Walls so high you forgot what love sounds like. The words hung in the air like smoke. He didn't reply right away. His eyes glistened faintly, but he blinked the emotion away. The man who had never cried at funerals or said I love you was cracking, even if just a little. Finally, he asked, you really think I've been cruel? I hesitated. No, I said honestly, I think you've been scared. Scared to lose control. Scared to be weak. Scared to be human. He leaned back in his chair, the cane resting across his knees. Maybe you're right, he whispered, but it's too late for me to change. No, I said firmly, it's not. He looked up, surprised at the certainty in my voice. You saw what just happened, I continued. Emily still loves you. Even after hearing every word, even after you told me to send her away, she still loves you. That means it's not too late. He stared into the fire for a long time, his jaw trembling ever so slightly, and then, he said something I'd never heard from him in my entire life. I don't know how, he whispered. I don't know how to fix this. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Start small, I said. Start by saying sorry. He shook his head. I can't. Yes, you can, I said gently, because this isn't about pride anymore. It's about her. She needs to know she's not a burden in this family. He didn't respond, but something changed in his expression, a kind of trembling softness that had been buried for decades. Minutes passed. Then, without another word, he stood up slowly, gripping his cane for balance, and started walking toward the stairs. Dad? I said quietly. He paused, his back to me. If she'll let me, he said, his voice barely audible, I'll try. And then he climbed the stairs, slowly, painfully, toward the room where Emily had locked herself away. I stayed behind, watching the fire flicker lower, my heart caught between fear and hope. For the first time in years, I saw the man who raised me, not the soldier, not the authority figure, not the wall, but the father. And somehow, deep inside, I knew something was about to change. The house was quiet, painfully quiet. I sat downstairs by the fading fire, listening to the creak of the old wooden stairs as my father made his slow way toward Emily's room. Every step seemed to echo with the weight of decades, the years of distance between us, the walls he had built, the things he had never said. Part of me wanted to follow him. Another part of me knew I had to let him go alone. Some doors need to be opened without witnesses. Upstairs, the hallway light flickered once, then steadied. I could imagine him standing there, cane in hand, hesitating in front of her door. He'd faced war, death, and loss, but never this. Never his own heart. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a soft knock. Emily, I heard him say, his voice rough and uncertain. It's Grandpa. No answer. He tried again. I said some things I shouldn't have. A pause, then, barely audible through the floorboards. I know. Her voice was fragile, cracked from crying. Downstairs, I froze, barely breathing. My father exhaled shakily. I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted. His voice trailed off, and I could almost hear the struggle, the battle between pride and love inside him. I just don't know how to talk sometimes. The silence stretched again. Then, a soft click. The door opened. I couldn't see them, but I could picture it perfectly. The old man standing in the doorway, his weathered face meeting the tear-streaked eyes of a 15-year-old girl who looked at him not with hatred, but with hurt. He took a hesitant step forward. Can I come in? A faint sniffle. Yeah. He walked in slowly, one careful step at a time, and I imagined him looking around her room, the posters, the scattered books, the little bits of her world he never tried to understand. I used to come in here when your dad was your age, he said softly. He'd sit on the floor with his notebooks, drawing things I didn't understand. I used to think it was a waste of time. Emily was quiet, listening. He sighed. Turns out, those drawings became the things that built his career. I thought I was teaching him strength. But really, he was teaching me something I never learned, patience. The bed creaked as he sat down. I wasn't patient with him. Or with you. There was a long silence. Then Emily said something I didn't expect. Dad said you were strict because you were scared. He gave a soft, shaky laugh. He's smarter than I ever was. I heard the sound of fabric moving. Maybe she sat down beside him. Scared of what? She asked. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost breaking. Of losing people I love. Emily frowned. Like Grandma? He nodded slowly. And, your aunt. My chest tightened downstairs. He never talked about her. Emily's voice softened. Dad never told me he had a sister. He doesn't like to talk about it, my father said. She was a few years older than him. Smart, wild, full of fire. Your grandmother said she got that from me. He smiled faintly. But she made choices I didn't understand. I told her she was ruining her life, that she'd bring shame to the family if she kept seeing that man. His voice began to tremble. We argued. She left, said she'd rather sleep under the stars than live under my roof again. The silence that followed was unbearable. When they found her, he continued quietly, it was too late. A car accident. She was 21. I felt tears in my eyes. I'd heard whispers growing up, a name, a story cut short, but he'd buried it so deep that even I stopped asking. Emily's voice broke through the silence upstairs. You blamed yourself. He inhaled sharply. Every day. Is that why you're so hard on Dad? And me? His breath caught, then he exhaled, long and shaky. Maybe I thought that if I could control everything, I could stop bad things from happening again. But control doesn't save people, Emily. It just pushes them away. The sound of quiet crying reached my ears, soft, muffled sobs, one from her, one from him. Then, a fragile whisper. I'm sorry, he said, for hurting you, for hurting your father, for letting my fear become your burden. And in the gentlest voice I'd ever heard my daughter use, she said, I forgive you, Grandpa. Silence. Then the faintest sound, her arms around him, his cane dropping to the floor. I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, I heard something in my father's voice that had never been there before, peace. When they came down together later that evening, Emily's eyes were swollen but smiling. My father walked beside her, slower than usual, but lighter somehow, as if he'd put something heavy down and didn't plan on picking it up again. He looked at me, his gaze steady but softened. She's not going anywhere, he said. And before I could reply, he added, neither am I. The fire had nearly gone out, but its last embers still glowed. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel cold anymore. The house was quiet that night, but it wasn't the heavy silence of fear or resentment. It was a gentle quiet, the kind that comes when walls start to fall, when hearts begin to remember how to beat together again. I watched as my father, frail and slow in his movements, followed Emily into the living room. She held his hand lightly, almost guiding him, almost supporting him. I could see the relief in both of them, a relief I hadn't realized I was craving too. Once they sat down, I noticed something in my father's hand, a folded piece of paper, old and yellowed at the edges. His fingers trembled as he held it, as though it carried a weight far heavier than any cane or chair could. What's that? I asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he exhaled and looked at Emily, his eyes softer than I had ever seen them. It's something I should have given you a long time ago, he said quietly. Emily tilted her head, curiosity and caution mixing on her face. He handed her the envelope. "This is from your aunt," he said. "The one I told you about, the one I lost all those years ago." Emily's hand shook as she took the envelope. "She wrote to me? She wrote to you, and to me. I never had the courage to send it." His voice broke slightly. "I was too afraid. Afraid of failing her, and afraid of failing you." Slowly, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded, written in careful, looping handwriting. I watched her eyes widen as she read the first line: "To the family I never wanted to leave. If you are reading this, it means life has given me a second chance to speak even if I am gone. I hope you can forgive me for leaving without explanation, and I hope my words reach the hearts of those I love most." Tears spilled from Emily's eyes. She looked up at my father. She forgave you?" He swallowed hard. "I never had a chance to earn it. I failed her in every way I can remember." Emily continued reading. "I hope my story helps you understand that love is never measured by control or by obedience. Love is measured by courage, honesty, and the ability to forgive both others and yourself. If you hold this letter, you hold my last wish, that our family stays together, that fear does not rule your hearts, and that those you love know you will always choose them, even when it's hard." She looked at my father with tears streaming down her face. "Grandpa, she wanted us to forgive you." He swallowed, blinking hard, the lines on his face deepening. I didn't know how to forgive myself," he admitted, voice low, trembling. Emily reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "Then start now. We forgive you, all of us." I felt my own eyes sting. I had never seen my father like this, vulnerable, raw, human, and yet, somehow, stronger than I had ever known him to be. He looked at me finally, and his voice was steadier now. "I was too harsh with your mother when she was little, too harsh with you when you were growing up, and too harsh with Emily, because I didn't understand how to love without fear. I can only try now." Emily's hand stayed in his. "It's okay, Grandpa. We'll try together." I watched as something incredible happened. The tension that had defined our house for years, the weight of pride, loss, and fear, began to lift little by little, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a stormy sky. Then my father did something I never expected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded object. Carefully, almost reverently, he placed it in Emily's hands. It was a locket, old, worn, familiar. Emily gasped. She opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny photograph of the aunt we had lost, smiling, alive, holding a baby in her arms. Emily whispered, "She was holding me?" "Yes," my father said softly, "before the accident, before everything. She wanted you to know you were loved. That's why she left this, for you, for us. I hid it because I didn't think we could bear it, but now, I think it's time we carry it together." Emily pressed the locket to her chest. She looked up at him, then at me. "We can carry it together." I felt a lump in my throat. For years, I had feared my father's anger, his coldness, his relentless rules. But in that moment, I realized that he had been shaped by grief he had buried under control, under pride. And now, finally, we could see him as a man who had loved deeply, who had erred, but who still wanted to be part of our lives. He exhaled slowly, almost in relief. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly, "but I will try. I promise I will try." Emily leaned over and hugged him. I joined in, and for the first time, 3 generations held each other without fear, without anger, without silence. The house, once heavy with tension, felt alive again. It smelled faintly of firewood, of old walls, and of something else, hope. As the night stretched on, I realized something crucial. Family isn't about perfection, or control, or fear. Family is about returning to each other, even after years of mistakes, even after words we thought were too late. And for the first time in decades, I saw my father not as a man to fear, but as a man to understand, flawed, broken, human. And Emily, my daughter, she taught all of us how to do it, because sometimes, it only takes one small act of courage, opening a door, speaking a truth, or letting someone in to change everything. That night, our family slept together in a way we hadn't for years, not as strangers under one roof, but as people who had finally chosen each other. And outside, the world carried on, but inside our home, the past had finally begun to let go. The next morning, the house felt different. It wasn't just the faint sunlight streaming through the curtains, or the smell of fresh coffee in the kitchen. It was something deeper, a quiet sense of possibility, of walls beginning to fall not by force, but by forgiveness. I found Emily in the living room, curled up on the couch with the locket in her hands. She traced the tiny photograph over and over, her fingers trembling slightly. I sat beside her. "Are you okay?" I asked. She looked up at me, eyes wide but glimmering with hope. I've never felt, seen like this before, she said softly, like someone really understands me. And Grandpa is trying, really trying. I nodded, feeling my chest tighten. You've given him a chance he never had for himself. She smiled faintly. I guess it takes a kid to remind adults how to love. Just then, my father came into the room, moving slower than usual, but steady. He carried 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to each of us. His hands were unsteady, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen in years: determination. I wanted to apologize again, he said quietly, for all the times I failed you, for all the fear, the rules, the walls. Emily placed the locket down and reached for his hand. You're doing okay now, Grandpa, she said gently. That's what matters. He looked at me, the lines on his face softened by tears he didn't bother hiding. I never knew I could feel so empty inside, even when I thought I was doing the right thing. Losing your mother, losing my sister. I buried it under pride. And now, I see how it hurt all of you. I leaned forward. Dad, we're here now. We can rebuild. Together. He exhaled slowly. Together, he echoed. For the first time, I felt the true weight of his words. Together, it wasn't just a promise. It was a commitment to change, to face the past, to embrace the future, and to allow love to exist without fear. The day passed in small, meaningful ways. Emily helped him water the plants outside. I watched them, seeing the way he slowed down for her, listening to her laugh, sharing little stories from his childhood, stories he'd never told me. It was humbling, beautiful, and painful all at once. Then, in the late afternoon, he called me aside. Michael, there's one more thing I need to show you. He led me upstairs, to a small storage room I hadn't entered in years. Dust hung in the air, and the smell of old paper and wood filled my nostrils. My father opened a drawer I didn't even know existed. Inside were stacks of letters, journals, and photographs, carefully preserved. At the top was a letter addressed to me, in my late sister's handwriting. Michael, if you are reading this, it means the world has gone on without me, but I still believe in you. I know life will ask you to forgive, to grow, and to love despite fear. Carry this message with you and know that you are never alone. I felt tears prick my eyes. My father placed his hand gently on my shoulder. I kept this from you, he admitted, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to give it to you without breaking myself all over again. Now, you can have it. I took the letter with trembling hands, and in that instant, a lifetime of pain and misunderstanding began to ease, not gone, but softened by truth, love, and the courage of those who had gone before us. Emily joined us, peering into the room. What did you find? A piece of our past, I said softly, a piece we thought was lost. She smiled faintly, placing her hand on my father's arm. Then let's not lose it again. And in that moment, I knew something profound. The family we were, the family we had lost, and the family we could still be, it all depended on choices. Small choices, brave choices, choosing to speak, to forgive, to reach out, to love. That night, we sat together at the dining table for dinner, all 3 of us. My father told stories of his sister, my daughter shared her dreams, and I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I had been holding my own walls too high. But tonight, they were coming down. Outside, the city buzzed with life, indifferent to the small miracles happening in one house. But inside, the firelight flickered over faces softened by understanding, softened by love, softened by courage. And for the first time in decades, the weight of silence had lifted. We laughed, we cried, we embraced, and in that room, surrounded by love that had been buried for years, we began to truly heal. I looked at my father, and finally saw him not as a man of rules, fear, or authority, but as a human being, flawed, scarred, and yet capable of change. And I knew, deep in my heart, that we could face anything together because love, forgiveness, and courage had brought us here. And this time, nothing could take it away. The days that followed were unlike any I had ever known. The house, once heavy with tension and silence, hummed with life, small bursts of laughter, shared meals, and quiet moments where walls weren't needed to keep people apart. But beneath the warmth, there were shadows we couldn't ignore. Neighbors whispered, relatives questioned, and the weight of old grudges lingered like smoke in the corners of rooms. People had long held opinions about my father, about our family, that were built on fear, misunderstanding, and pride. And now that we were trying to heal, their whispers became a subtle storm pressing against our fragile peace. One afternoon, I came home from work to find my father and Emily in the backyard. My father, normally stooped and rigid, was kneeling by the small garden he had started with Emily. She was holding a watering can, laughing as she tried to teach him how to balance it without spilling. Seeing them together, I felt a strange surge of hope, but my father's voice broke my calm. "Michael," he said, a note of worry in his tone, "people are watching. They'll judge us. They don't understand the changes we're trying to make." I crouched beside him. "Let them watch. We don't need their approval. What matters is that we choose each other, every day." He exhaled slowly, glancing at Emily. She smiled at him, radiant with the courage of someone who had already forgiven and learned how to love unconditionally. Later that evening, the tension returned in an unexpected form. My father received a letter from an old friend, someone who had once influenced him toward strictness and control, someone who had been a silent voice behind decades of fear. The letter was short, pointed, and accusatory. It criticized him for losing control of his family, for letting Rebel Lion replace respect, and for being weak. I watched as his hands trembled while holding the paper. I had seen him command rooms, control people, bend the world to his will, but now he seemed fragile, vulnerable, human. Emily came to his side, gently taking his hand. "Grandpa, you're not weak," she said softly. "You're learning. You're growing. That's strength, not control." He looked at her, tears glistening in his eyes. I never thought it would be this hard to do the right thing." I stepped forward. "It's not easy. Change never is. But the important part is you're doing it with us, not against us." For hours that night, we talked, really talked, for the first time in decades. My father shared stories of his youth, of mistakes he had made with my mother, with my sister, with me. Emily shared her fears, her dreams, and her understanding of the world as she saw it now. And I shared my hope that the future didn't have to be defined by the past. Somewhere in that conversation, a shift occurred. The shadows that had haunted us, the guilt, the fear, the anger, didn't vanish entirely, but they lost their grip. For the first time, the three of us were facing them together. Then came the next challenge. My father, emboldened by our renewed connection, decided to confront an old relative who had long criticized our family for letting Emily grow up spoiled and disobedient. It was a tense encounter, held at a small family gathering. The relative began their tirade, listing every past mistake, every incident of defiance from Emily, every flaw they believed my father had passed down. But instead of withdrawing, my father stood tall. He admitted the mistakes of the past, his mistakes, ours, without excuses or blame. He spoke of forgiveness, of growth, of learning to choose love over fear. Emily, beside him, added her voice, small but unwavering. "We are still the same family, but stronger now. We forgive, and we love." I watched the room fall silent. Old grudges, long-standing assumptions, and judgment slowly melted away under the weight of honesty, humility, and courage. Some relatives nodded, others stared, but the change had begun because truth, once spoken, cannot be ignored. Afterward, we returned home. The three of us, father, daughter, and me, sat together in the living room, exhausted but exhilarated. Emily leaned her head against my father's shoulder. "I think this is the first time I've ever seen you truly brave, Grandpa," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I've learned it's braver to admit mistakes than to hide behind authority," he said. "I'm still learning, but I think I'm ready to face the rest of the world now." I looked at them, feeling the enormity of what had happened. The journey wasn't over. We still had challenges, whispers of judgment, and the weight of years past, but the foundation had been rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, courageously. And in that quiet moment, I realized something profound. Love isn't about perfection, obedience, or control. It's about facing fears together, holding each other when the world doubts you, and choosing connection over pride every single day. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars. And inside our home, the darkness that had once felt permanent was now just shadows, shadows that we could illuminate with courage, forgiveness, and the love that had always been waiting for us to notice it. For the first time, I truly believed we could overcome anything, together.